so we're doing a follow-up on Abiomed.
Right, so one of your questions was about whether they're a takeover target for either an acquisition or a hostile takeover after a failed acquisition. So I looked into that, just kind of what the traits of companies are that are frequently taken over. And this one actually does have quite a lot of them. They're looking for companies with low overhang, which is when a company has a lot of different kinds of preferred stock and regular stock issued. That makes it really complicated to start buying back all the shares to get like a majority ownership in the company and to make those decisions once you've changed ownership. So we have that going against us as far as a acquisition goes. They also have low debt, and generally that is something that people want to avoid takeover because it means there's less risk, and because at least during an acquisition, if you're cooperating with the management of the company that you are acquiring, they'll probably give you all of their financial statements, and they'll give you stuff that you can't just get publicly like we did. They'll give you a lot more in-depth look into, I don't know, what their risks are and whatnot beyond what you can just glean publicly. If you're doing a hostile takeover, you don't get that information, and debt is a lot scarier because you don't know. I mean, you know, I guess, what their plans are, what it's made up of, but you really don't know how confident they are about that beyond what they've put in the 10K and what they revealed publicly. However, something that makes us less desirable for takeover is companies with current litigation. Again, there's that risk, and if you don't know exactly how real that risk is going to be, because again, they're 10K, they say what, we are reasonably confident that this litigation will be like defended. I'm sure internally they have a lot more to say about it, and if you don't have that information, that provides some risk, and you might not want to pick up the company and get hit by that later. So, all in all, it's kind of a 50-50 on how this is going to end up, but I think the odds of a hostile takeover are low, and I think a regular acquisition inside the healthcare market, I haven't found out a whole lot about companies merging recently and acquiring others. It doesn't seem like there's anyone that's dedicated to scooping everything up. So I'd say it's unlikely to happen, but if it did, it probably wouldn't be the end of the world.
So healthcare is actually kind of an interesting sector in that there has been a huge kind of push towards acquisition, growth through acquisition as opposed to organic growth. Maybe less so in the medical device space, but the pharma and biotech side of the house, like one big criticism of large pharmaceutical companies these days is that they do very little development of new techniques or treatments in-house, and they just acquire biotechs as soon as it shows the product that looks like it could be commercially viable. So that's one reason why I asked you this question. Another kind of warning or indicator that they might be a takeover target if they have a lot of cash on their balance sheet is one thing. But if you didn't make heads or tails of this question either way, that's okay.
The thing, we had management capabilities because they're expecting some growth there, so I looked into some of the top executives, and oddly enough, a lot of them worked at General Electric and some of their different divisions. Some worked in the healthcare section, so for example, Michael Minogue, he used to work at General Electric Healthcare for 11 years. He's the board of director, or on the board of directors at Abiomed. Abiomed is a privately health company, but Insulet is public in there. They were up yesterday. He's on the board of management at Bioventus. He's also a chairman on the Medical Device Innovation Consortium. So it seems like he has a lot of experience in kind of a broad array in the healthcare industry. Their guy that's doing the chief medical officer, Balazarian, this guy up here on the right. So he used to work on the FDA like advisory panel, and he also worked at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Weber, he's the chief operating officer. He used to work at GE Security and Aviation. He did work at GE Healthcare and Medical Systems before that. And then CFO, this guy over here, he used to work at Watts Water Technologies and Honeywell International, who are both very large companies that aren't in the healthcare industry, but he's the financial officer, so it's not exactly, it's easily transferable. And then the last guy is the chief tech officer. This is the guy that's actually coming up with products, and that's kind of where they got their Impella brand is from. This guy, he's a German biomed scientist. He went to Helmholtz Institute of Biomedicine. But the big thing that we wanted to talk about that came up yesterday was their stock went down like 20% on Monday. So on Sunday, the American Heart Association had a big get-together, and this guy, Dr. Amit Amin, assistant professor at Washington University, he came out with this study that he did showing that Impella is associated with an increased risk of death, bleeding, stroke, and among patients undergoing the angioplasty, which is like when you use this thing. But it's not a clinical study that he did. What he did is he looked at all these different hospitals that are employing Impella versus the intra-aortic balloon pump, and he tried to establish almost a trend line without considering some of the nitty-gritties. It's saying that 45% of patients versus 35% of patients died with Impella. Also that 31% of patients versus 16% of patients had advanced bleeding with Impella. But the big thing is this is a class 3 device according to the FDA. That means it goes through the most rigorous scrutiny because it sustains human life. So the chances of that going unnoticed is unlikely. They've been through such rigorous trials that we've already looked at this. We've seen that their device is, in fact, a good device. So one of the things that it talks about is that how they pick their patients, that's another big topic. And so if it didn't make the differentiation in his paper whether or not this was an elective surgery or if it was an advanced cardiogenic shock. So essentially, some of these people may have said, hey, I want this device, and maybe they were at a higher risk already, or they had a higher prognosis. So that's one of the things that's kind of poked a hole in this study that Impella has come back with as well, saying, hey, you didn't look at all these different things. We have all these clinical trials backing this up. This isn't the silver bullet. But we did see kind of I'm gonna pull that up, the stock slide a little bit because of that. So that's when it was, that's today. I guess I could do 5 days, but right around here is when that happened, right? Sorry, yeah, right there. November 17th, 18th, closes on the weekends, so that's why it skips. It went back down, but everything that we've seen recently, so the one back day, it seems to be climbing back up. I think everybody got scared immediately when they saw that headline that Impella may not work like it was supposed to. So everybody panicked and kind of bailed out. And we're starting to see that climb back up now. So everybody's like, oh, okay, I guess this study isn't actually as hard cut as they initially thought. So that would present us with a little bit of a buying opportunity. So that's the other thing. There wasn't a lot of upside when we first pitched it, right? They were already trading closely with what our target price was, so that did not leave a lot of room for growth. This could present a buying opportunity. We did adjust our assumptions in there. We peeled back our sales growth a little bit by 3%, just in case this does actually take effect, like influence doctors' opinions of the actual product. We came up with a total target price of $209.27, which is still higher than what it is trading at now. We pulled up the Bloomberg consensus because we were a little bit curious there. They're putting it at $238.
Okay, and that the Bloomberg consensus has not been updated.
Right. I doubt, yeah, exactly.
So none of us in this class are like cardiac surgeons, right? So my concern here is that we're taking on some risk in just accepting Abiomed's defense here relative to this guy's paper saying, hey, you just picked the wrong study population. And it seems like there's been 2 incidents in the last year where Abiomed has suffered quite a bit because some study has come out.
Well, the first one was the FDA paper. They essentially, the way they stated it confused people. They thought that it had a...
Yeah, but Abiomed's stock price never fully recovered after that.
Well, it's only been a couple weeks, I guess, since that happened, right?
That was
a
August.
month. Sorry, yeah, August, a month. So I think we were starting to see that, and then this came out again. I'll pull up that song again. I gotta pull that one easy. So that first one should have been right about there. Yeah, so August.
There was a drop, end of July, stock was trading at 280. Big drop, next day, August 1st, 204. See that first big kind of cliff,
Right.
or the second cliff, I guess, on that chart.
I know. I think it might have I'm pretty sure that's when. I'm pretty sure that's when that study came out. I think my dates might be a little bit skewed there, but I'm fairly certain that's when that big drop was, because we talked about that in the first one, and that was the only drop, because then it goes through here. Earnings came out on the 31st, or the 31st. That's where we're at. It is a complicated study. It is hard to tell, but I think more merit should go into the clinical trials that have been rigorously scrutinized for the past decade to get FDA approval versus one study that has not been peer reviewed by one professor.
So, yes, it should be that way, but when someone is saying that public sentiment may not view it that way, right? And at least on the stock price chart there, I'm seeing that public sentiment is saying this is a real problem.
Yeah, right, but it has gone back up since that initial drop.
By like
Right.
2% compared to 20%, right?
Right, well, 4%, 3.51, according, because it was originally trading at what did we say beforehand? Yeah, it hasn't fully corrected, but this is brand new news for this one. And then FDA, I feel like it's just such in a short time span that it is.
So what do you think's going to change everybody's minds about this?
The
Like,
fact
when do you
that-
think that everybody's going to realize the actual value? Like, when the next earnings come out and they see that it didn't or did affect sales?
I can imagine it's still affecting sales, because as a doctor, which is why we did dial back our sales growth. I do think it will affect sales with that initial sentiment.
But not as much as everybody thinks that it's going to.
Right, what I'm expecting is that this study is gonna get some scrutiny from it. It's already, I mean, I highly assume that the director of, the chief medical officer has already looked at it, has already made a couple statements about it, pointing out what I kind of pointed out, that, hey, you're just looking at a big trend, you're not taking to account all of these factors. Some of these people it was already more likely that they were going to die. I mean,
So you're saying that on the next earnings release date is probably when people are going to change their minds and realize that it's undervalued.
right. So that might be a hold then instead of a buy right now. The only reason we would pitch it as buy right now is because it has such a low price comparatively to what the target should be.
So, your argument here is that there's value right now because there have been some issues, right?
Right.
Some PR issues. You think they are just PR issues and not fundamental issues with the product that the company offers.
Yes.
My concern is that none of us are qualified to really make that judgment.
Okay.
So, not to say, the other thing is the people who are buying and selling the stock are not necessarily doctors either, right? So they maybe have the same or maybe some more credentials than we do in terms of evaluating this product. But even if doctors are and the FDA says this is a great product, if there's already like some scare in the market, how's this company going to overcome that?
I think just through rehashing of their trials, they would, if I was them, I guess having another study is too time consuming and too intensive to do that, but just pushing for the studies that have a longer time frame versus this one study. I think once that becomes more solidified as these studies get more scrutinized, you'll see that still kind of work out.
I think the results will speak for themselves too if they actually. I mean, it seems that a lot of the shortcomings of the appellate are because it's being used in situations where it's already not necessarily a lost cause, but again, situations that are way different from the clinical trials, and that wouldn't have been accepted to begin with, and that appears to be an issue with this new study as well, or at least this like new look at the old data. So if, like they said, like I think they're still in the process of like actually getting it to be used properly, and once it does, I think the results will speak for themselves. Because it will be as effective as it was during the clinical trials, if it's actually used the same way it's supposed to be.
So do you guys think this is an acceptable amount of risk to take on relative to the potential reward?
It is some significant risk, I would agree. I think it was, if we're expecting it to go back up to somewhere in the previous trading range that it was before this happened, around 220, it would be like 20% on return, but I mean, that's gonna take some time. I know we are a long-term investors, but even if it just goes up to $200, we're still gonna see at least a 10%.
So are you still pitching a buy?
When is the return call?
Next, so they just came out with 31st, so the next one shouldn't be until.
Are you pitching a buy?
We'll pitch it as a whole. It is hard to tell. I'm not a clinician. I can't officially say, but yeah, that's. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It's unfortunate that all that happened after you did all that research.
It was like the timing was brutal. I was like, oh good, one day.
Well, it's
It's good timing because we
Yeah.
could have bought it and then it could have dumped.
we've had some weird timing on a few occasions in this class. Like we bought Reynolds, which was then bought by British American Tobacco like the day after we bought it. So we ended up like realizing a 30% gain overnight, and I'm like, that was completely luck.
Right.
Not at all part of the analysis. Just wow, we got lucky. So there are certain aspects of this. Like, there's like a famous quote, I'd rather be lucky than smart, like 9 times out of 10. Especially when it comes to picking stocks, there are definitely aspects of this that are outside of our control. I would say, yes, you have an opportunity here because there is some value given the stock decline, but it's certainly a bit of a gamble. I think these bad PR moments that have happened in the last like quarter really aren't going to be reflected in sales until the next quarter at least, if not further down the road. So it might be a concern. It might be overblown, but it's kind of hard to say at this moment. So think about it. If you think about how much risk you're comfortable taking on, and maybe tell us definitively on Thursday whether you think this is worth investing in at all.
Okay,
Taking a
keep
small
up to date
position
on
in.
that, see if anything
Okay.
new about it. Another thing that I found pretty interesting is I started to look at like the short interest that was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and it was crazy. Like right before this happened, it seems like people knew. I don't know if it was the American Heart Association that was around there, but saw an increase in short interest, and now that happens, it's just right back to like negligible.
Yeah, well, part of it is like you've seen this big drop in price, so at this point, like probably short, like a lot of people who have a short position in this are like, okay, this is corrected enough. And it might be something where this is like a short-term play, like you buy and you see like appreciation over the next few days. Like after Volkswagen had a bunch of governance issues, I bought, like personally, not in SIP, but I bought like some Volkswagen stock because I made an assessment and thought, okay, is this something where I think it's going to correct back to its like trading price beforehand? No, but I think it'll probably come back up from this kind of depression we've hit right now. So I held it for a shorter term, which isn't something we typically do in SIF, but this might be an opportunity to. I'd let you guys experiment with this. If you guys are interested in maybe, I would say come back with a convincing case on Thursday. If you think there's going to be at least a short-term rebound, it might be something where we take a smaller position just to see how it does and set a limited time frame for when we would consider selling.
Okay.
Okay?